Welcome back to Something in the Wilderness. My name's Steve, and in each episode of the show, I select an Andrew McMahon song to discuss. I'm excited to explore a different chapter in Andrew's career today, one that I haven't touched upon in the show quite yet. I wasn't saving it up for any particular reason. In fact, I was a pretty big fan of this album when it was released nearly 10 years ago, and I still love it today. But it seems to be one that's less referred to than most. So let's go back in time a decade to a simpler time, before the pandemic, before vinyl records made a comeback, Warped Tour was still a thing, and a certain band that we all loved was about to release an album, and I think we all had pretty high expectations for. Most everyone likes a good summer song, right? Even if summer isn't your favorite season, or even if it's not in your top 3 seasons, summer songs are still kind of a thing. But how about a good winter song? Can you think of a song that reminds you of wintertime? That even when you hear it in any other season, it's still reminiscent of the snow and the cold and maybe just a little bit of darkness that comes with that time of year? Well, I'm obviously not talking about a Christmas song here. But today is dedicated to a song that feels kind of cold, kind of somber, and it references winter more than Andrew's average song. I'm referring to the song Amy I. The band is Jack's Mannequin. The song was track 4 on People and Things, released on October 2nd, 2011. In a way, there are 2 music videos for this song. An official music video, and the People and Things short film version. One really unique thing about the People and Things album is that there was a companion short film for every single song on it. I hesitate to call these all actual music videos, though. They seem to be more or less random visual pieces set to each of the songs. And please, hardcore fans, correct me if I'm wrong. Interestingly, though, Amy I is the only one that has an animated one in the collection, and mostly it's a lyric video for the song as well, which is different than the rest. All the other short films or visual pieces, if you will, appear to be random footage that may or may not pertain to the song or to the lyrics. The second video for Amy I that I mentioned, though, is an actual music video. Andrew, Bobby Anderson, and Jay McMillan are all in the studio, as well as an appearance by Jim Scott, who co-produced the song. I do like this music video. It's just them in a studio playing, hanging out, but it's kind of neat. It feels like a behind-the-scenes sort of vibe to it. Though I can't believe I didn't know it existed until recently. More shockingly is how often I say that on this show. But Amy I wasn't a single, so I wasn't exactly looking for a music video. This song was the first one Andrew wrote with Matt Thiessen in Matt's house in Nashville. Andrews also stated that it was the first time he had co-written a song with somebody. Matt Thiessen's best known as the lead singer of Relient K, which in my opinion is an excellent band that formed around the same time as Something Corporate. Andrew and Matt have been friends for a long time, probably since those early days of touring together, like on the Warped Tour, I would assume. One of my favorite pop-punk albums of all time is Relient K's Mm-hmm. It's so consistently great front to back. If you haven't heard it, you've got to give it a listen. If you haven't listened to it in a while, you got to listen to it again. It really holds up over time. Now, Relient K's made some pretty good albums since then, and they've also gone off in slightly different musical directions than pop-punk. But that's the album of theirs that really stands out for me. However, Amy I, nor the other 2 songs that Andrew and Matt wrote together for People and Things, sounds anything like Mm-hmm. But that's okay with me. Side note, I also learned that Matt Thiessen and I share a birthday, so that's pretty cool. The story behind the production of the People and Things album isn't entirely clear to me. It was the first one where Jim Wirt doesn't have credit as the primary producer, and I guess I wonder why. Jim produced every Something Corporate track and almost every Jack's Mannequin tune up until that point. So why the change? Well, I have a theory which I'll come back to with supporting evidence, but this does somewhat explain why People and Things has such a different sound and feel to it than anything Jack's Mannequin did previously. In a September 2011 article from The Hollywood Reporter, Andrew explains that he had an entire album's worth of material ready to record with a producer named John Fields. John has a pretty diverse producing resume, but some of my favorite albums he's produced include Jimmy Eat World's Chase This Light, Rooney's Calling the World, and All Time Low's Dirty Work. But he's produced a lot more pop and pop rock than that, with artists like Demi Lovato, Pink, Backstreet Boys, and even the Jonas Brothers, just to name a few. Anyway, at some point Andrew decided to scrap this entire album he was working on with John Fields and go in a different direction. He told The Hollywood Reporter about his change of heart in 2010. In June, we did a date in Richmond, Virginia, and this feeling culminated of, oh my gosh, this isn't right. This isn't the record I'm trying to put out right now. I think I sort of evolved and realized along the way that I had this amazing band I'd been playing with, I wanted people to hear what that sounded like on a record. So what the record needed was really different than what we had at the time. He then pivoted to instead working with Rob Cavallo and Jim Scott instead of John Fields. Rob Cavallo is a very famous producer. Now, you may not know his name right off the bat, but you definitely know his work. His claim to fame is producing Green Day's 4 most popular albums. So if you're a Green Day fan like I am, you can probably name them. Ready? Let's see how you do. Dookie, Insomniac, Nimrod, American Idiot. Did you get them all right? Cavallo has also produced some of the most popular work by My Chemical Romance, the Dave Matthews Band, and the Goo Goo Dolls. So by 2011, he was basically known as a hitmaker in the industry. From the Hollywood Report article again, Andrew recalled, "Everything developed over time. Rob kind of came in and saved the day in a lot of ways, at a moment when we ran out of a little bit of steam in January of 2011. When all was said and done, we had so many hands, so many talented and selfless people who helped us get from point A to completion." The article does note that in addition to Bobby on guitars and Jay on drums, several other musicians joined the fold as well. I do wonder about the intent of bringing in all this additional help. A hit-making producer, musicians from other bands, additional songwriters, and if these decisions were solely made by Andrew or by the band overall, or if it had to do with some push from the record company to make a hit album. And hey, I get it. As fans, we feel like Jack's Mannequin were a large part of that time of our lives, that they were huge, right? But really, they never touched the mainstream. They had singles, music videos, they were on the radio a little bit, they toured relentlessly, but outside of people that I told about them, I don't feel like anyone I knew really knew who they were, which might sound crazy to an Andrew fan who had a lot of friends who are Andrew fans. So this last quote I'm going to read from the article admittedly was a little off-putting to me, though I understand to sustain a career as a musician, you have to make music that people will pay to hear. I can assume that most artists will hit this crossroads at some point in their careers, right? Making the art that they want to versus making the art that people want to hear. And for the very lucky ones, those two things are one and the same. Andrew stated, "There's always that hope we'll get a hold of radio once and for all, and get a hit out there, and we'll get the press and those types of things you really want to blow the band past whatever ceiling it's hit before. But the reality is that that's a thing I don't have control over. The only thing I can do is bring it to the street and play these songs for people and hope they fall in love with them and pick up the record." Now, I was surprised to find that People and Things did hit number 9 on the Billboard 200 charts, though the album only stayed in the chart for 2 weeks. I've heard this story before, though. There was probably a huge push by the record company initially, and then it didn't hit big in the first month, so they stopped promoting it. Neither of the singles themselves charted. I really don't feel like anyone knew of the album besides me at the time. And then the band played their final show almost exactly a year after its release. So I'm assuming they didn't get the desired results from the album, and it makes me wonder if that's part of the reason they broke up. It may have been a record company issue or just Andrew's desire to make music under his own name next, but it's a shame, because I think songs like Amy I off this album are some of Jack's Mannequin's best work, and a lot of that went completely overlooked by the majority of people, including some original fans. But the album also in general has a sound that wasn't popular at the time on the radio, and it still really isn't. It probably would have been more popular in the early to mid-90s, when you had bands like the Gin Blossoms and Better Than Ezra, and even Sister Hazel that had big hits on the radio. I think this album would fit in really well among that genre and that time in music. Well, let's get back to the song itself. On Amy I, Andrew did piano and vocals, Bobby Raw Anderson and Tim Pierce played the guitars, Jay McMillan was on the percussion and drums, Jamie Muhubarak on keyboards, Chris Chaney of Jane's Addiction on bass, that one was kind of surprising, and finally, producer Jim Scott on the anvil. Now, I'd never heard of someone playing the anvil before when I read the liner notes, but I did find a video of a blacksmith playing an anvil as an instrument, which I'll link in the show notes. But upon further research, I did find that there was a much more portable version of an anvil as an instrument. It just looks like a hunk of metal sitting on a flat board. So that makes more sense. But I guess how else are you going to get the sound of a metal hammer on metal? So can you pick out the anvil in the song? According to Setlist FM, this song's been played live 105 times between Jack's Mannequin, Andrew McMahon Solo, and Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. My wife and I saw Jack's Mannequin in April of 2011 in Dayton, Ohio, just 6 months before this song came out. So unfortunately, I've never heard this one performed live in person. Andrew most recently played the song on his Instagram live streams in 2020, once on April 1st and again on August 5th. There aren't too many songs that he played more than once in those live streams, but I guess this song does work really well in that format as just a piano and vocal song. So a few songwriting notes here. Andrew told the story of writing this song at Matt's house outside of Nashville, which was significantly colder than where he lives in California, of course. So when he woke up that first morning, he was struck by how cold the floor was, and inspired by how the floor of the old house creaked as he walked across it. You can find this story on Spotify because they released a series of song commentary by Andrew a few years back. Search out Amy I on Spotify, and you'll find one listed under Introducing People and Things by Jack's Mannequin, where he introduces each song with a story. There's also a Best of Andrew McMahon playlist track by track, which doesn't have any songs on it, but has clips along with some commentary on 21 of his favorite songs. One of those songs is Amy I. Of course, being the obsessive that I am, I moved each of those commentary tracks onto my Something in the Wilderness playlist on Spotify so that each of these commentaries plays before the songs he's talking about. So if you like, just look at my Something in the Wilderness playlist, which I'll link in the show notes, and you can find all the commentary tracks in order, lined up with the songs. So who is Amy anyway? I don't know if we'll ever have an answer to that question, officially. Whenever I've read or heard Andrew's comments about this song, he doesn't ever mention anyone named Amy, but when he spoke about his time writing with Matt in Nashville, he wasn't sure which of the two of them came up with the line that has the name in it. But they agreed immediately that the Amy I part sounded like a good hook, and I agree. The syllables with those vowels do make a nice sound together. So I don't know if Amy was someone important to either one of them. When I put out a call in the Andrew McMahon Facebook group about who Amy is, somebody suggested that Amy's a pseudonym for Kelly McMahon, just like Annie on The Glass Passenger. The same commenter also suggested that anytime Andrew has a song with an A name in it, that he's referring to Kelly. So I can think of at least one more Jack's Mannequin song with an A name in it. So let's talk a little bit about the sound of the song now. I've read two different comments out there on the internet about this song where a fan compared the opening to the song to Paper Rain off of Upside Down Flowers. So obviously these are recent comments. I gotta say, I guess I hear it, but I don't really feel like one has to do with the other at all. The tone is similar, I guess, but some of the keys and the pacing is different enough to make it a completely different song in my opinion. I don't know, feel free to play these two songs back to back and let me know what you think. So I mentioned earlier that this entire album fit well into that mid-90s pop rock alternative rock genre, and Amy I fits the bill for sure. I think a decade after that music was really popular, the genre was being referred to as adult alternative or adult contemporary. And I don't know if that would be offensive to bands like Gin Blossoms, Better Than Ezra, Sister Hazel, or even Jack's Mannequin. I mean, I'm okay with it, but I could see all this music being on the same playlist, though. Another thing, I don't think this song's dominated by any one instrument either. And that's probably another thing I could say about the entire People and Things album. There are Jack's Mannequin songs where the piano leads, and there are other songs that are more guitar-driven. This song allows all the instruments their own room. You definitely notice the piano, but you also notice the other instruments just about as much. Andrew's idea to make this a full band album really worked well in my opinion. So on a last note about the sound, I was thinking about that anvil again. The instrument, it isn't as clear as the others, but I think I do hear it match up with some of the drum parts, but not all of them. It's like they were thinking the drum worked well with the song, but Jim Scott or maybe someone else on the team thought they needed an extra kick, so they added the anvil hits over the top of the drums. That's what I'm guessing. So unlike most of Andrew's songs, I don't actually have a whole lot to say about the lyrics to the song, believe it or not. I know that Andrew and Matt were hanging out, and they became inspired by the snow on the trees and how cold it was in Nashville that morning. But the lyrics are mostly pretty direct, especially the first verse. Snow on the ground in Tennessee, north came south at the tops of the trees. Another long winter tried to fight this freeze, waiting but the cold's got a hold on me. It's really hard to say those lyrics without singing them, by the way. The second verse seems like more of a metaphor of the cold for a relationship. So give me a cloud, there's so much at stake. Decided to walk, there was ice on the lake. Though I never worry, 'cause it never breaks. Though I hear it cracking under my weight. Another long winter trying to fight this freeze. Waiting, but the cold's got a hold on me. It sounds to me like this song was about a tough time in a relationship. I know that some of the other lyrics in the album are about Andrew's first years of marriage to Kelly and how marriage can be pretty tough to adjust to. So I think the harder parts of a relationship can easily be compared to a cold winter. And obviously the line where he feels the ice cracking under his weight could be attributed to that as well. So I think that's what Andrew and Matt were going for here. So Amy may be a pseudonym for Kelly, or it could be someone that Matt was dating around that time. He was engaged to Shannon Murphy until 2009 when she broke it off, and then he married Emily Wright in 2015, so I doubt it was about either one of them. There's two pieces of the song that are repeated throughout that really stick out to me. I do agree with Andrew and Matt, that the Amy I melody is very catchy, and that makes it the most singable lyric in the song by far. But I also want to point out the primary riff of the song. The song opens with the piano riff, but after the first chorus, it's joined by the guitar, playing the exact same riff. And I like that intensity that the guitar brings to the sound, almost like the song is escalating between verse 1 and 2. The song ends on that same riff too, again, where the guitar is the primary instrument. So I would say I have two favorite parts of the song, and that's the Amy I melody in the chorus, but also that riff that repeats over and over again throughout the song. It's very catchy. So there are some other versions out there on YouTube. I'll link those two Instagram live stream versions in the show notes, but there's actually an even better one that I recommend that I'll link as well. So Andrew was in the Lightning 100 radio studio in Nashville shortly after the album was released, and a fan requested that he play Amy I. Since he was promoting the album, I'm now starting to think that maybe that was meant to be a single at some point. Maybe it was even supposed to be the lead single. And it makes me wonder, would the album have been more successful if this was the lead single on the album? We'll never know. Anyway, this version is a perfect piano-only recording of the song that I highly recommend, and I'll link in the show notes. So some final thoughts. This is definitely one of the standout tracks on People and Things for me. In fact, it may be my favorite, but there are a few other songs in my head that I have to go back and pit this one up against, just to be sure. Thank you guys again for listening. If you wouldn't mind going out to Apple Podcasts and rating the show, that would help more people find it. Also, post a comment on one of our socials. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to message me directly, as always, email somethinginthe.wilderness@gmail.com. Folks, we've made it through another long winter trying to fight this freeze. May you never feel that way again. At least until next year.